Welcome everyone to Vital Life Energy Formulas. Today's webinar and what we're going to be sharing is about the heart and the 4 chambers of the heart, the 4 valves of the heart, along with the 4 universal sockets, the 4 mutation of the mouth, meaning acidity in the mouth. Actually, it's alkalinity in the mouth, to acidity in the stomach, to alkalinity in the small intestine, to acidity in the large intestine. First, we'll go through, for Vital Life Energy does not treat or diagnose, cure or profess a cure of any sort of disease. What makes creatine and what is the benefit of creatine? A lot of people take creatine to build muscle. This is very important to understand. If we do not make it, then it can swell the muscle, swell the kidneys, swell the reproductive organs, and also swell the heart. Creatine is manufactured from arginine, glycine, and methionine. Now, they're in the Vital Life Energy formulas. Nitric oxide formula has the arginine along with the glycine. There's methionine in a lot of the different Vital Life Energy formulas. Methionine's in the heart and muscle formula. It's in the stem cell formula. It's in the PA formula. It's in the BC formula. It's in the CE formula. It's in a number of different formulas. Methionine, arginine, along with glycine, make creatine. That creatine builds muscle, is a molecule that the body can naturally produce. It's made primarily in the kidneys and completed in the liver by the 3 amino acids, glycine, arginine, and methionine. The amino acids are converted into creatine phosphate, which is then stored in the skeletal muscles and used for energy. So that's how important creatine is. If we do not make that creatine, then, and you just take it, which a lot of bodybuilders will take creatine to bulk up and build muscle. Creatine helps maintain a continuous energy supply to your muscles, actually during intense lifting or exercise. It also provides energy and helping to increase muscle growth, which is what creatine does. It speeds up muscle recovery. When you exercise, the micro tears in your muscle fibers, creatine actually regenerates. As Jeff was sharing today when I was talking to him, that when creatine is not made because you're not getting enough of those free-form amino acids that the liver needs to make creatine, and you just take creatine, which builds muscle, then it can calcify the kidneys, it swell the reproductive area, and swell also the heart. So then because of that, then it can cause calcification. Understanding the heart and what we're doing with the program and understanding the oxygen flow into first the right chamber, the right ventricle of the heart and the atrium. So the right ventricle actually pumps oxygen poor blood to your lungs. The left atrium receives oxygen-rich blood from your lungs and pumps it into the left ventricle. Then it's the left ventricle that pumps the oxygen-rich blood through the entire body. Now remember, as I was sharing, if we don't make creatine, because there's not enough of those free-form amino acids, then it can swell the heart, affecting the right ventricle, which pumps the oxygen-poor blood into the lungs. So it goes from the right ventricle that pumps oxygen-poor blood to the lungs. The left atrium receives oxygen-rich blood from the lungs and pumps it out through the left ventricle. And then that left ventricle pumps oxygen-rich blood to the entire body. Understanding the liver and the kidneys, which is where that creatine is manufactured from those free-form amino acids. And if you take additional creatine, then you won't have it swell the heart, affecting that right ventricle, that atrium, that actually picks up the poor oxygenated blood and moves it through the pulmonary artery to move into the lungs to pick up oxygen and then pump back in through that atrium, and oxygenated blood moves back through the ventricle and pumping around the entire body. Just like the rivers of life from Dr. Stone's teaching, there are 4 chambers of the heart and their valves. The rhythm of our breath, which those of you have heard this before, goes the rhythm of our breath about 18 per minute, and the heart, which is about, the breath is about 18 per minute, and the heart, which is about 72 beats. And that's a ratio of 1 to 4. The 4 valves of the digestive tract, namely the pylorus, ileocecal valve, sigmoid, and rectum. The 4 mutations that I started to share about, with the mouth being alkaline, the stomach acid, the small intestine alkaline, and the large intestine acid. The 4 main areas of the spine: cervicals, the neck, the dorsals, thoracic, the lumbar, and the sacral regions. And then the 4 universal sockets that carry our weight to do the labor, which is our 2 hips and the 2 arm sockets that creates the square. Remember, this is part of the skeletal muscles, which creatine is essential for building the skeletal muscle. Where and what causes a buildup of plaque that can affect the arteries, these chambers, affect the low oxygenated blood that actually has to move into the right ventricle of the heart to then exhale out through the lungs that carbon dioxide, so we can absorb more oxygen, and more oxygenated rich blood moves back through that left ventricle of the heart to pump oxygenated blood through the entire body. So there's a balance: inhalation, oxygen; exhalation, carbon dioxide. But the kidneys are an important part of what I just said about the lungs and the heart, from the right to the left, and the lungs absorbing oxygen and then releasing carbon dioxide. The kidneys are an important function with the removal of carbon dioxide out of the blood, so that better blood oxygenation moves back into the bloodstream. So the kidneys are a filter of the blood. So if creatine, which is where it's made, right? One of the main areas where the primary area that creatine is made is within the kidneys, completed in the liver, right? Made from those amino acids, repeating them again: glycine, arginine, and methionine. Those kidneys, if you're not getting those free-form amino acids to make that creatine, it'll swell it, which then swells the kidneys and swells the heart and swells the reproductive organs. Well, oxidation is a big problem today, because oxidation can come from stress. When we're under stress, the body actually goes into fight-flight. That cortisol fight-flight inflames the liver. The glycine levels drop in the liver, because glycine is the essential amino acid to neutralize any sort of fermentation. Minerals are essential in the body too. The essential fatty acids are also important too, along with the B vitamins being the cofactor to the amino acids. Oxidation can come from stress. Oxidation can come from your diet. Oxidation can come from chemicals. So daily we need to support our liver to be able to neutralize the oxidation that we're getting from either stress, which we're all under today, or our diet, or the chemicals that we're being exposed to. They all create oxidation. Now remember, as I was sharing about the 4 chambers, all right, okay, of the heart, also the 4 valves within the digestive tract. The descending side of the bowel, where we empty out and the upward gases move down from that descending side of the bowel, has a direct connection to the heart. The peristalsis muscle of the colon, not only does it move to go number 2 and empty out the toxin when we go eliminate and get the upward gases to move down, that peristalsis muscle is very important for it moves the lymph. That lymph in all of us, which is circulating throughout the body where blood cannot, it's a clear substance that moves to parts of the body that the blood cannot, is the lymph. That colon muscle, the peristalsis, and understanding the 4 valves of the digestive tract, as that muscle grips, which we're going back to creatine, which is stored in the muscle, when we're making it, strengthens that muscle. That creatine is also very important for the intestinal lining of the small intestine to absorb water, to absorb sodium, to absorb the electrolytes. You can take all the electrolytes you want. If the body does not have and is not making the creatine's not in the intestinal lining in that muscle to absorb the water. Sodium is a very essential mineral in our body as it maintains oxygen in the cells. It's on the outside of the cell and maintains oxygen in the cells. Potassium carries the oxygen into the cells. Sodium's on the outside of the cell maintaining oxygen. But that creatine amino acid that the body produces is essential to absorb that sodium. Almost 2.6% of the Earth's crust is made up of sodium. So nature has shown us another duplication of our body and how we're made and how we're a representation of Mother Nature. It's important to be able to help our liver to be able to neutralize these oxidation areas that we're getting oxidation from that's being activated in our body, and keeping the glycine levels up to neutralize any fermentation, because that oxidation can come from the stress, can come from chemical, alcohol, I forgot to mention, can cause oxidation, and the diet, which actually that's one of the areas where we can get oxidation. Oxidation first builds up in the liver, and the liver doesn't keep it there because it's incredibly intelligent and it knows it's got to maintain oxygen in the blood, right, to the heart. One of the 4 main rivers of life, that heart muscle, those valves, those chambers of the heart. So oxidation starts from obviously the liver. The liver doesn't keep it there, but it dumps it straight into your intestine. And then the small intestine starts to, use that oxidation and starts to try to break it down, but it builds up in the lining of your mucosa of your intestine and creates the plaque. And the plaque then enters the blood from the small intestine, and that's what can build up in those chambers and in the valves of our heart. Now, the program, as we've taught you all about methionine, that very important primary amino acid in the liver that binds to the chemical with magnesium, a very important mineral, just like sodium. That magnesium with the methionine that binds to the chemical then makes a new cell, makes a new red blood cell, that is, and that's cysteine. And that's how the liver then clears the chemical out, chelates it out of the body. So the liver first has to remove the chemicals that cause the oxidation. The oxidation is what creates the plaque. But remember, we're getting oxidation from stress. We're getting oxidation from fermentation of, alcohol. I mean, you can have a liver function of an alcoholic and never drink a drop of alcohol in your life. Why? Why is that showing up that you have a liver function of an alcoholic when you don't drink? Because you're making it. Yeast, carbohydrate, and sugar makes alcohol. Some people have that genetic weakness where they easily ferment and make alcohol. That alcohol creates the oxidation that then forms the plaque. Now, if you have that glycine in your liver, which is in the peace and tranquility formula, it's in the adrenal boost formula, it's in a number of the formulas, the BC, which is the joint and tendon support, and the cellular energy formula, the PA, the peptide anti-aging formula, right? That neutralizes any sort of fermentation, neutralizes any sort of alcohol production, which is what creates plaque. The diet, which I'm talking about fats that easily oxidize, and that's eating meat. And it doesn't matter whether that meat is, red meat, lamb, fish, chicken, or animal protein. The oils, the fats that in the animal easily oxidizes. It easily creates plaque because it takes so long to break it down. It sits in your digestive tract from anywhere. If you're eating red meat, lamb, beef, fish, any of those animals, it can sit in your digestive tract for anywhere from 6 to 8 to 24, even up to 72 hours before you break it down or move it through your intestine. So it oxidizes, where if you're eating rice and you're having beans, or you're having, salad, or you're having, pulses, it only takes a maximum of 2 hours to break it down. There's less likeliness that you're going to get oxidation because it's not sitting in your digestive tract fermenting and rotting. So again, another way that we're getting oxidation and creating plaque, which not only is it building up in the lining of the intestinal mucosa, affecting the microbiome in our gut, it's going into the portal veins that go back to your gallbladder and your liver, and is clogging up the gallbladder. Now, that's very important to understand because, again, that gallbladder, which stores bile, and even if you don't have the gallbladder, you need to keep your liver healthy, because bile from the liver to the gallbladder is what activates the digestion in our stomach, the hydrochloric acid digestive enzymes. But most importantly, everybody, is that pancreas that activates the pancreatic enzymes, which that bile flow helps not only the digestion in the stomach, but also the pancreas and the pancreatic enzymes. Now, those portal veins, which plaque through your diet, stress causes oxidation. You hear about people over-exercising causing oxidation. So stress on all levels causes oxidation. Oxidation creates the plaque buildup in the intestinal lining, which the blood moves through, picking up its nutrient supply. So if it's going to be in the intestinal lining oxidizing, creating plaque, it's definitely going to enter your bloodstream, which then is going to go to the right chamber of the heart and go into the right atrium and the ventricle and into the pulmonary artery, into your lungs. You're not going to remove as much carbon dioxide, and you're not going to pick up as much oxygen in the blood to move into the left ventricle of the heart to pump out oxygen through the entire body from that left atrium and ventricle of your heart. So you can see that these things are important to address. Stress, none of us can avoid, but we can use our program, we can use our treatments of the Epsom salt foot baths and the castor oil packs, and we can use those as a way to help us to switch off the adrenaline, the cortisol, to allow the body to heal and repair and rebuild and neutralize the oxidation so we're not building plaque. It's while we sleep is where the body repairs and rebuilds. It's not when we're up moving around. It's while we sleep. And as Jeff has always shared with all of us, it's not how many hours, it's that first 90 minutes of sleep is the most crucial hours of sleep for the body to regenerate. So use your amino acids to neutralize the stress that we go through in the times that we're all living in today, because we're all under some level of stress. To neutralize it, to allow the body to go into the regeneration. Nature's always looking for regeneration. It's not looking for dis-ease. It's always looking for regeneration. So use your program, use your Epsom salt foot baths. If your back's hurting, or you've got some neck pain, or your feet are, hurting, or you've got a knee weakness, it's the foot bath or the full baths. Now they work a little bit differently, but they're helping us to get more magnesium, which is a very important mineral, to do what? To chelate out the chemicals that we are all being exposed to. We're all being exposed to high levels of chemical, and that magnesium that's in the Epsom salts, which are also going to get it through our skin because the skin breathes. It's the third kidney and the third lung. It absorbs moisture and oxygen and waste and removes carbon dioxide and eliminates, right? So it absorbs oxygen and moisture and eliminates waste and carbon dioxide, just like the lungs, inhalation, exhalation. The baths are helping the skin to breathe, and you sweat in the bath, and the sweating is inducing a fever. And so in nature, fever cure, right? When you actually induce a fever, you're actually burning up a virus and burning up toxin. Heat, light, oxygen. Viruses, fungus, mold, bad bacteria, irregular cells cannot live in heat, light, and oxygen. The light absorption internally, externally, is the amino acids that hold on to the light. They're a duplication of the cerebral spinal fluid that holds on to that internal, external light. The oxygen is the red blood cells made in the liver as well as the bone marrow. Through the stem cells, the raw material of the amino acids that activate the stem cells within the bone marrow. Those stem cells regenerate your bone, regenerates your brain, your heart. Those stem cells from the amino acids produce your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets. Oh, those very important platelets. The spleen that regulates those platelets screens the blood and removes old damaged red blood cells. So those platelets, those T cells, those intelligent immune cells, your B lymphocytes, your red blood cells are all manufactured within the bone marrow. The same fluid moving from your lower back up your spine is exactly the same duplication of the fluid inside the bone marrow. Let's have you make your own bone marrow, not eat bone broth and get marrow from an animal. Have you do it yourself. Have your body produce its own bone marrow, its own regenerative cells, stem cells, to create a new heart, a new brain, a new liver, a new pancreas, a new entire skeletal system, a new bone. Thanks, everyone, for listening. It's so wonderful to have you all join. I'm just going to pause the recording. So the arginine that we talked about with making creatine, that's the nitric oxide formula. I know some people that will have, say, the herpes simplex breakout, and you read about arginine circulates the herpes simplex. So lower arginine, like cashews, for example, have very high levels of arginine. So people who break out with cold sores, they usually stop eating cashews or they don't eat them because they break out with the cold sore every time they eat it. There's the arginine that's in the cashew. But actually, you need arginine to activate T cells, to activate stem cells. You need the balance of the arginine with the amino acid glutamine, because glutamine regulates the arginine. But what neutralizes any sort of oxidation of arginine is citrulline, which is in the nitric oxide formula. So citrulline and arginine produce nitric oxide. Now, again, that goes back to the heart that I was just sharing about with the ventricles and the atrium, to the low oxygenated blood to the right chamber. And then through the pulmonary artery, picking up oxygen and then pumping blood oxygenation out through that left chamber. Nitric oxide is essential for that whole process I just shared. The citrulline and the arginine, citrulline neutralizes oxidation of arginine. Arginine and citrulline produce nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the dilator of the blood vessels. to allow the blood circulation into the heart, to pump blood oxygenation through the entire body and remove the carbon dioxide. But that nitric oxide is very important also for the males, for the male erection. It's also important for us females, regardless whether we have an egg to ovulate and bleed or not. That nitric oxide is what gets the blood circulation down to the cervix in the female that contracts every single day with the moon cycle. Because that nitric oxide through the arginine and the citrulline that's in the program is important for not only the ovulation for the female, it's also for the cervix that contracts with the moon cycle every single day for the female to move the lymph. Females have double the lymph than males do because we have a huge uterus, pear-shaped uterus, and we have breast tissue, more breast tissue than males. So that we have double the amount of lymph, double the amount of hormone, because that lymph, as I was sharing earlier, moves to parts of the body that blood cannot. It's a clear substance that can move to parts of the body that blood cannot. Every joint, there's a lymph node. And every joint where there's a lymph node, those platelets, those very important platelets, move into those joints to actually allow healing within the cartilage and the connective tissue. I hear a lot of people saying about bone on bone, and they, in their knee, and they have bone on bone in their knee, or they have bone on bone in their hip. Again, stem cells. Have you make your own bone marrow, your own stem cells. Those platelets are what you regenerate your cartilage and your connective tissue in every joint where the synovial fluid is. So it's not dried out, and a person is experiencing bone on bone where the cartilage and the connective tissue is worn away. The platelets need to move into the area to repair the connective tissue. Arginine is important because that arginine activates with the other amino acids, and the citrulline specifically allows the stem cells in the bone marrow, because it's one of those primary amino acids that actually gets the bone marrow to produce the platelets through the stem cells. So that arginine being one of the important amino acids that makes creatine with the glycine, and then the methionine. So you can see the program and the importance of the program, because you're getting those nutrients. If a person's reacting to arginine because of the internal active viral activity, the ornithine that's in the formulas with methionine will make the arginine. So no worries if you have the viral load being active and you can't use a lot of the ARG, but again, the glutamine that's in the formulas regulates the arginine, with the citrulline that neutralizes the oxidation that produces the nitric oxide. But the ornithine and the methionine, which activates growth hormone, with the lysine, which lysine antiviral, right, anti-herpes, lysine, the amino acid lysine, bloodshot eye, red eye is the lysine deficiency. All this dry eye that people are getting today, the tear ducts, not producing enough tear, not producing enough fluid in the eye, or watery eye, overproduction of tear ducts. We're dealing with the flow of the cerebral spinal fluid in both situations. The fluid that the eye is bathed in, 80% is cerebral spinal fluid. The optic nerve from the back of the brain to the eye. So where is that coming from? That's coming from the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve in the brain, the 10th cranial nerve in the brain, connects directly to the eyes, the ears. Well, that's important. The ears, right? Tinnitus. That has to do with the vagus nerve, the pressure on the vagus nerve. That vagus nerve that goes to the ears, the eyes, the throat, the heart. Oh, back to the heart again that I started talking about with creatine. So the eyes, the ears, the heart, the pancreas, the liver, the spleen, the gastrointestinal tract, all the way down to the sacrum is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, is the only nerve that has a right side and a left side, the X interface. When we're doing our Castrol packs, we're helping our vagus nerve. We're helping when we do the Castrol packs, regardless where you're positioning them, whether it's going over the heart, whether it's going over the adrenal area, or it's going from the lower abdomen from the belly button down to the lower abdomen, or it's going on the back of the neck. It doesn't matter where you're doing it. You are helping the vagus nerve because, like I said, it travels from the back of the brain stem there, all the way down to the sacrum, independent from the spine. You're influencing your vagus nerve when you do your castor oil packs. The castor oil, regardless where you put it, is moving into the area where the application is applied. It's helping the nerve. It's helping the cervicals, as I talked about Dr. Stone's understanding of the 4 rivers of life, with the spine having the neck, the cervicals being one of the areas of the 4 rivers of life, to the dorsals, which is the thoracic area of the spine, to the lumbar, lower back, to the sacrum. So regardless where you put it, you're helping balance the sacrum, the parasympathetic nerves, the back of the neck, the parasympathetic nerves. You're influencing your vagus nerve. You're releasing any pressure on that vagus nerve. You're helping your heart. Stress puts pressure on the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve tightens up, and that's the reason people get anxiety and get stressed. So when you're doing your pack, you're releasing the vagus nerve, regardless where you position it, because it travels from the back of the brain all the way down. The foot baths are another way of helping. They ground us, they drain the lymph, they draw the toxin out through the lymph nodes at the bottom of the feet. There's a direct connection from the feet to the reproductive glands, meaning the prostate, the testes in the male, the ovaries, the cervix, the uterus in the female. When you do a foot bath, you're draining any inflammation, you're draining any toxin out through the bottom of your feet, and you're draining any toxin that's in those areas. You're also drawing the inflammation away from the brain. If you take your feet and you put your feet on a piece of paper and you draw around your feet, many of you have heard this because Jeff has shared this many times, you look at your feet, put them together and you draw around it, you're seeing your brain. So nature's mapped itself over and over and over again. So your feet are the negative pole of the brain. That's the reason, taking care of our feet are important. We neglect our feet. When you do your foot bath, you're loving your feet, you're loving your brain. We can't soak the brain, but we can through doing the foot bath. So that's how we can soak the brain, is by you doing your Epsom salt foot baths. Epsom salts is magnesium sulfate, right? The sulfur, the healing mineral spring of the sulfur, bubbling up from the core of the earth. Again, that sulfur, which is what the liver needs, is what? Methionine that we started with, and understanding about making creatine. The arginine, methionine, the glycine. That's the sulfur. That's the sulfur amino acid. You're regenerating and allowing that healing spring of your liver to be a regenerative spring, not a dead spring. In nature, they know when there's greenery around a living, healing spring, that's living and live healing spring. If there's no greenery growing around the healing spring, it's a dead spring. So, of course, amino acids, the methionine, the cysteine, the taurine, they're the sulfur amino acids in your program. That's the healing spring. It's regenerating that healing spring of your liver. The importance of understanding how the body works as a whole system is what we're helping you all to learn. Christian Barnard, that famous heart surgeon back in the 70s, he took out an old heart and he put in a new heart. He knew he did not cure heart disease, that the same disease that was attacking the old heart was now attacking the new heart 2 to 5 years later. So then he started to research, because he really wanted to cure the disease, but replacing the old heart with the new, the same disease was now attacking the new heart 2 to 5 years later. And he started research and started to see that it was the liver where the disease was coming from. It's the reason, take care of our liver, everyone. Don't eat things that are going to cause oxidation, right? Take your formulas to neutralize the stress, because none of us can avoid the stress, and stress causes oxidation. You can do something about your diet and not eat things like animal protein that's going to oxidize, because it's going to sit in your gut, not being digested, and ferment, which is going to cause oxidation. So Christian Barnard knew that he hadn't cured the disease, because the same disease was attacking the new heart 5 to 10 years later, or actually 2 to 5 years later. All right. And so then he started to research, knowing it was coming from the liver, that it was a taurine deficiency. Good old amino acid taurine. Well, lysine, methionine make taurine. So no point in just taking L-taurine. You're going to make it, everybody, just like the creatine that we started with. So that's the reason the brilliance of Jeff and Ellen's program made and put together 30 years ago, but actually they started their learning about amino acids when Ellen was actually pregnant with their daughter. He's 36 now. So that's when it actually first started, and the understanding of how they're put together, which is the reason you don't just want to go and take creatine. You got to make it. Otherwise, it can swell the heart, and it can swell the kidneys, and it can swell the reproductive area, which we do not want that, because then they can build up plaque in those areas. That's what we're dealing with prostate inflammation and ovarian inflammation and plaque buildup in the arteries and irregular heartbeat, arrhythmia. So what Christian Barnard found, it was a taurine. It was a vitamin C and bioflavonoid deficiency. It's not about taking vitamin C, everybody. It's about having the vitamin C with the bioflavonoids. Guess what? That's what your adrenals are made up of. If you just take vitamin C, sodium ascorbate, ascorbic acid, and you don't have the bioflavonoids, your body's intelligent. It'll start to leach those bioflavonoids from your adrenals to metabolize that sodium ascorbate or ascorbic acid. So Christian Barnard knew that it wasn't about just taking vitamin C. It's about having the vitamin C with the bioflavonoids, with the magnesium, with the B12, with the B6, the folic acid, the folate, with the methionine, with the cysteine, with the taurine. And he took that to Congress to actually show his findings. But of course, it's a lot of money in doing surgery, so they didn't pay any attention to it. But we're sharing that with all of you because that's your program. There's B12 in the formulas. There's a lot of magnesium in the formulas. There's the methionine. There's the cysteine. There's the taurine. There's the B6 in the program. That's actually going back to the 70s when that famous heart surgeon knew he hadn't cured the disease, that the disease was coming from the liver. And when you take your aminos, which is also the reason it's also regulated more regularly through the day, not just once a day, it's morning, sometime in the afternoon, and evening time. The body repairs and rebuilds. The oxidation gets taken care of. The stress gets taken care of. It's not about not having any stress. That's not living. It's about the recovery of it. It's about us going into that deep sleep for that first 90 minutes of sleep, is where the body then neutralizes that oxidation from the stress. New cells are created. It's a new day. So that's the understanding of what we're sharing about the 4 rivers of life and making creatine and making how important those 3 amino acids are of arginine and glycine and methionine, not just for creatine, which is needed for us to absorb water in the body from the small intestine, that is, but also is needed for removing chemicals, for chelation. We all hear about chelation and people having that genetic deficiency of chelation, not being able to absorb minerals. Again, back to the methionine. The arginine for the stem cells and the T cells, and the nitric oxide for blood vessels and dilation. That's the brilliance of the work that Jeff and Aline created many years ago that we're all getting the benefits of. So that's the webinar, everyone. I wanted to share that with you, and we'll be doing this regularly, and the recording can come to you later so you can all hear it again. Thank you, everyone, for being on with me today, and it's lovely to have you all join.